before I start, just a quick disclaimer. Everything I'm about to say represents my personal views and doesn't speak for my past or current employer in any way. If you're watching this video, you probably know what happened about 3 weeks ago. Microsoft announced about 9,000 layoffs, many of which were in the Xbox division, affecting probably a few hundreds to a few thousand developers. I think quite a lot of discussion online, a lot of justified outrage, anger, but also quite a bit of confusion, and lately a general feeling of giving up. So this is how things are now. The gaming industry is undergoing these layoffs and there's nothing we can do about it. So I just thought to myself, well, there is something I can do, which is just explain why the layoffs are happening. That's the reason I wanted to make this video. And this is just the latest of so many layoffs, so many mass layoffs that have affected studios around the world and started around 2022. In total, it's probably between 30 and 40,000 people that lost their job in the last 3 years. So yeah, today I hope to give you a clear explanation on why these layoffs are happening. So first, let's take a look at the state of the video games industry today, because it might be quite a bit different than what you think. So in total, the global video game revenue in 2024 was around 190 billion. 2025 is expected to be around 200 billion. So let's use that number. And half of that is mobile. The other half is divided between PC. So 25% is PC, and the rest is consoles. And the console portion is about 50% PlayStation, 30% Xbox, and 20% Nintendo. So essentially what this means is that if you release a Switch exclusive game, your market is about 6% of the total. Just for reference, Roblox is around 1.5 to 2%, and Fortnite is around 3% of the total. And these are just numbers, so they don't really tell you about what kind of players spend money where. But let's keep them in mind because they help build this picture of decisions that are made by big companies and studios. So now if we go back to 2019, the total number was around 150 billion. So just comparing the number with today, the growth seems great. It went from 150 billion to 200 billion. But in 2022, the total was already around 190 billion. So essentially, you had this very nice upwards trajectory that then fell flat in the last 3 years. So this slowdown in growth means that from an investing point of view, the video games market is a mature market. So we don't expect very high spikes and growth in the future, but just a more steady growth or possibly some dips here and there. So remember again, before 2022, these numbers were just going up. So if you're a game developer today and you're releasing in the next few years, you actually have a pretty good idea of how much money you're going to make, how many copies you will sell. Obviously, nobody knows for certain, but you can just look at the past few years, and probably numbers are not going to be that different. So this is also very important, especially for huge studios, because before 2022, they were probably putting a lot of money into developing games, expecting growth overall. And just a note here, sometimes these companies probably wanted to believe in the growth without actually predicting. So this could be a topic for a different video. Okay, so let's say you are making a game and you need to pay people to make the game. How do you get funding? There are three main ways to get your game funded. The first way is banks. So you go to a bank, they're probably very happy to give you money, but then they tell you that you need to pay them back starting next month. So if you're making a game during the development time, you're likely not earning money. So this is a big issue. The second method is investors or publishers. So these are people that are also happy to give you the money, but instead of asking for money back, they want equity or shares in your company. So this is much more appealing because obviously you don't have to pay them back immediately. They understand how game development works, so they're willing to wait until the game is released to get their money back with interest. So perhaps 15, 20%, 25% once the game is released and successful. The third option to get funding is to go directly to the consumers. A very popular option is crowdfunding, where the customer will pay, in this case, the gamers would pay for the game before it's finished. And obviously, this is a great option because what you get is just a clean profit. There's no interest that you need to pay back. You just need to deliver the product. And a side variation of this, which is a big point in the conversation, is live service games. So these are games that you could argue are not finished, or rather, there's a core product being delivered, and then it's updated over time, over seasons, and you could even get more money from selling each season pass or content split in that way instead of delivering the whole game all in one go. So obviously you see how attractive this last method is because you maintain full ownership of your studio and you have much less risk. Right, so what happened in 2022? Well, all these three ways of funding started collapsing. So in March 2022, the US increased interest rates from 0 to 0.5%. And by the end of the year, the interest rates were around 4.5%. So if you were borrowing money from a bank, you would need to pay back quite a lot more by the end of the year compared to the start of the year. And this sent ripples throughout the market and spooked investors as well. So you were in trouble if you were borrowing from a bank, but also if you were relying on private investors, they were not as happy to invest their money anymore because they were very cautious. They didn't know how the market would react. And also, if they just kept their money in the bank, they would still make 4.5%. Right? So over basically a quarter, venture capital funding basically half. So the first quarter of 2022 was actually very good for video games. It was like a record quarter. The second quarter, in terms of funding, it was really a disaster. And the whole year, the total venture capital investing globally year over year dropped 35%. So this is a huge decline. Just to give you some numbers for the games industry, VC funding in 2021 was around 10 billion, and in 2022, and it was halved. And then in 2024, it was around 2.4 billion. And this year, the first half of 2025, around 300 million. So basically, investors are not interested in video games anymore. What are they interested in? Well, yeah, obviously. So if you look at the trend, you can see like investing into video games, it's just declining from 2022. And AI, obviously, it was very high before 2022 already, had some ups and downs, but now is strongly on the rise. So basically, that's where people are putting their money. And finally, as we saw earlier, the market has now expanded. So people are not spending as much money into games anymore, especially if you consider the numbers we discussed with inflation in mind. They're really not that good. So the number of players increased, but the amount of money they spend is lower. The pandemic obviously had a play in this, but this is just a big miss in terms of predictions. People expected it to keep growing to some degree, but it has declined. So in terms of live service and crowdfunding, basically we know that the number of players is just not going to increase them, the number of paying customers. So to recap, starting from second quarter 2022, taking a loan to fund your game has been more expensive. Also, investors and venture capital have been hesitant to invest into a video game company and probably generally shifted their focus on AI. And finally, players are spending not as much money in game. And the key here is that this was not clear at the start of 2022. So in January 2022, Microsoft announced the acquisition of Activision Blizzard King for $69 billion. So that decision was probably made with very different outlook of what the industry would be in the future. And in February 2022, Sony announced the famous 10 or more live service games that they had in development. And again, this decision was probably made thinking that the market would grow and the number of players that wanted to buy games, get into games would grow much more than they had. Or maybe they had a suspicion of what was to come, but it was just too late to steer the ship back. So in the last few years, in general, basically you've seen studios faced with a very simple equation. Is the game that they're making gonna bring in more money than they're spending? If the game is not gonna make enough money, well, they have no choice but to cancel the game. Okay, so again, this was not super clear before 2022 because the industry was growing. So studios were already spending a lot of money, but they were hoping that the market that they released the game into would grow as well. Okay, but now we have a pretty good idea of what the market is. So studios are probably sitting down, looking at this equation and making decisions based on that. The only change that is on the horizon is the release of GTA 6. But we can probably discuss this another time as well. Something else that you might wonder with Xbox is that this equation is not as simple because they have Game Pass. So they have this subscription service where if you release a game on Game Pass, it might be harder to exactly how much money has made because it might sell some copies physically or on Steam, but also bring in more subscribers. So you need to account the number as well. And Game Pass has been quite interesting to follow because Microsoft have invested so much money into it. They've been so focused on making it work. But the answer that we have today is simply that it's not growing anymore. So until 2024, it was in a very good trajectory in terms of revenue and subscribers. But the last year, the number of subscribers has only grown 3%. So if your game is relying on Game Pass to boost sales, that's also not a sustainable option anymore because we know the number of subscribers is likely not going to increase that much. So again, there's no magic hoping for a miracle there either. And it's pretty clear now that Microsoft will or pretty clear now that Xbox will miss their estimates, the numbers they were hoping for with Game Pass. Okay, so if you got a bit lost in the terminology and the numbers there, here's a little story to understand the layout. So let's say you are on the way to work and every day you see some trees on the side growing lemons. One year there's one lemon on each tree, and a year later there's two lemons and then there's 4 lemons on each tree, and 6, 8. And by that time, you talk to the owner of the trees, and they say, yeah, it's a great business. We sell a lot of lemons. Next year, we might get 10 lemons, 3 or 5 lemons. So at that point, you've seen this growth in the past few years. So you go to the bank and you tell them, I want to buy some lemon tree, but I don't have enough money. So the banker says, sure, we can help you buy the trees, but sorry, next month you need to pay us back. So the lemons take a while to grow. Obviously, this is not an option. You leave the bank, and on the side of the road, there's like very well dressed individual approaches you and is like, well, I'm an expert in lemon trees. So I will help you buy the lemon trees. I'll also help you buy water for the trees. In exchange, you just give me ownership of some of the trees. And obviously, when the lemons are grown, you'll pay me back. Really. So you take on the offer, plant the lemon trees, and every day you water them. 1 year goes by, you see on the side of the road the lemon trees of your friend at this point, and there's still just a lemon on each tree. Another year goes by, and there's still only 8 lemons. So you go back home, you open the door, and sitting at the table, there's already the investor waiting. He just says, well, we made a deal hoping for 10 lemons on each tree. So you know what to do.